So President Yoon must have gotten a memo saying that his little Instagram story of an apology for declaring martial law last week was a little bit insufficient. So we got a 28-minute long explanation in a speech that he gave on Thursday, Korea time, and he literally said he was looking for attention. It was a cry for help on behalf of the Korean public, but instead of twisting his milkshake on a football field or taking out mortgages to pay for press conferences and press on tears, all he had to do was open his mouth and then the people would listen because he is the president. But he thought that his only resort was martial law. You know how they say, this meeting could have been an email. Well, his martial law could have been a press conference. Even Edward Snowden and Julian Assange did better. They said that they were whistleblowing, and as the president of South Korea, President Yoon essentially adopted that tone, that he was whistleblowing essentially on his own government, but really whistleblowing on the Democratic Party controlling the legislature, saying that the Democratic Party, by controlling the legislature, was sabotaging the presidential office and then also the judiciary. But Edward Snowden, Julian Assange, they did it all without martial law. And instead of WikiLeaks, President Yoon could have probably just had some kimchi leaks go out on Naver, or he could have done a YouTube video. He could have done newspaper interviews, old school TV interviews. He could have gone on Instagram. He could have gone on TikTok, X, anything, because he is the president and everybody would pay attention. Well, in his 28-minute speech, which we'll go over, he seemed to have changed his mind about resigning and just giving in to impeachment. He said that if that is his fate, he will accept it, but it looks like now he's not going to be passive about it. He says that he is going to fight to the end. So he's taking back control and he's going to be spilling the tea while he's doing it. And this made me think, if you're spilling the tea like this, and even in the speech he said like, oh, there are things that I couldn't say, I couldn't just sit idly by. Well, he should have just said it then, because he's saying it now. So we could have skipped the little scary martial law part in the middle. Because early on in his presidency, he did have a very innovative format of answering reporters' questions impromptu on his way to work. And people thought that that was very transparent, it was unscripted, and it was direct, constant access to the president. That format was probably a little bit too advanced for him because, early in the morning, he's probably still sleeping off last night's soju, and a little bit too unscripted might be a bit of a challenge. So they brought that down. But I thought that that was a mistake for him to have abandoned it completely, because it really did allow him to set the agenda of the national discussion and debate. First thing in the morning, all the reporters would show up for him. Again, he's the president. Not everybody shows up for anybody who opens their mouth. And for some people, they have to take out second mortgages like New Jean's mama to pay for these press conferences. He didn't have to do that because he's the president. So if he wants to speak, people will come and cover him. And doing that consistently and on his own terms, even if he had his own YouTube channel, it would have been 100 times more effective than declaring martial law. Unless, of course, declaring martial law was about saving his wife, which in the 28 minutes he did not mention whatsoever. So let's go over the full text of the South Korean president's address to the nation regarding his martial law declaration. My fellow Koreans, I stand here today to clarify my position, thank goodness, regarding the declaration of martial law. The opposition parties are currently going berserk, claiming that the declaration of martial law equates to insurrection, is what they claim true. So essentially, he's trying to avoid getting in trouble because under Clause 84 of the Constitution, the president cannot be charged with a criminal offense during his tenure of office except for insurrection or treason. So in his clarification during this 28 minutes, he's also trying to clarify, I didn't do no insurrection and I didn't do no treason. So then he goes on and says, who are these forces paralyzing state affairs and disrupting the Constitution in the Republic of Korea? Over the past 2.5 years, the opposition parties controlling the National Assembly have refused to recognize the president elected by the people and have continued agitating to remove and impeach the president. You should have expected this, especially when your main rival, who narrowly lost, Lee Jae-myung, became the head of the Democratic Party. And also, it's not like you flew into Korea a week before you got elected president. You know what presidential politics are. It's not as if you were just some businessman that turned into a politician. You spent your life in the prosecutor's office and you impeached President Park. So you kind of should know what's up. It means that they refuse to accept the results of the presidential election. Now that's a big leap. That's a big leap. And I wonder if did he talk to New Jeans? Because you know how they said like, oh, being ignored in the hallway means bullying. And then now the president is essentially claiming that because he's being bullied politically, that means that the Democratic Party didn't accept the election results. I hate to break it to him, and I don't even know why I'm the one breaking it to him, but those politicians on both sides, but I have seen firsthand, oh my goodness, the Democratic Party, even among their own people, the bullying is intense. That's not because they reject the election results. That's just how they do business. I don't like it. I think it should change. I think you should change it, but you should definitely not be crying about it and claiming that that's not accepting results of an election. Since then, as many as 178 rallies have been held to call for the ouster and impeachment of the president. 178. So he's taking count. He's keeping his list, but he's not Santa. That is freedom of speech. That is pretty bad to have all these rallies, but these people might really be upset, and thank goodness they have freedom of speech. You know, if you focused on reducing inflation, you know, people will instead probably get drunk and go out to eat instead of rallying. But the more the soju budget goes away and the barbecue budget goes away, people go out and rally for fun and for legitimate reasons. And so in some ways, maybe it's a good thing that people are spending their hobby time on democracy rather than getting drunk and trying to see how much of Korean barbecue they can stuff in their face. In a bid to paralyze state affairs, they have pushed to impeach dozens of government officials since the launch of my administration. Impeached officials are suspended from office for a long period of time until the verdicts are handed down, even if they are found to not be at fault. So I like how he's telling us a little bit about how the sausage is made, and he should just be telling this to us in general. That would be great for him, because it does make sense. It makes sense that he is telling us that this is, and I agree with him, this is horrible. This is so much like the internal politics just getting in the way. Like they're just fighting for more power instead of running the country. And he's trying to say he's running the country, but all this political infighting is paralyzing the government. That is a definitely legitimate thing to say and try to figure out, but you don't declare a martial law to figure that out. And he knows about impeachment, right? He knows about impeachment. Like, he knows because he's done it himself. He should know about this. I don't know why he just did not get the memo. Said even before impeachment proceedings began, after the motion was proposed, many officials voluntarily resigned from office. Yes, that is political warfare. They're trying to knock out your team. Reckless attempts at impeachment have paralyzed state affairs. Yes, they are wasting their time with all of this, but that is part of this political game, and part of the other side of the political game is to try to avoid that situation through whatever. You're supposed to be the political expert. Why is a YouTuber trying to explain to the president of South Korea how they're doing their job, how they should do their job? The opposition lawmakers have impeached cabinet ministers and the chairperson of the Korea Communications Commission, as well as the chair of the Board of Audit and Inspection of Korea, and prosecutors who investigated their misconduct. It has come to the point where they are even intimidating judges. So great. This is good. This is good YouTube content for the president of South Korea to make himself, to say like, look, I got the receipts. This is who they're going after to attack me politically and to render my administration ineffective. People want to know that. They want to know essentially what are the games while it's being played, and not just hear the results of the football game afterwards. They want to watch it, and then they want to see what's happening. You could have told this before martial law. They are employing these bulletproof impeachments in order to cover up their own corruption and completely destroy the discipline of public officials and rule of law. Yeah, we want to know when they're trying to cover up their own corruption. Bring it out. Spill out the tea. Already, he's barely into his speech. Had he just done this through social media or the regular media, he'd already have people like on his side. Moreover, they have proposed 27 unconstitutional special prosecutor bills and launched politically charged propaganda campaigns. Yes, tell us about, just tell us. You have 27 that you can tell us too, okay? That could be its own playlist. And now they are pushing for a bulletproof legislation allowing criminals to grant themselves a pardon. Okay, we need an example that you could probably give us. I'm telling you, you would have like 1 million subscribers in like 1 hour. The opposition-controlled National Assembly has become a monster that is destroying free and democratic constitutional order instead of serving as its bedrock. Look, he's calling people monsters. This will be good. If this is not the paralysis of state affairs and a national crisis, what is? Well, essentially, that's like every day in Korea, though. Like, now you're over-dramatizing it a little bit. Says the list doesn't stop here. Oh my God, he knows how to make a cliffhanger and everything. The colossal group of opposition parties is now threatening even national security and social safety. Okay, now we're getting into national security. For example, 3 Chinese nationals were caught flying a drone and filming a U.S. aircraft carrier docked in Busan in June. Found on their smartphones and laptops were photos of Korean military installations taken over the past 2 years or more. Last month, a Chinese man in his 40s was caught filming the National Intelligence Service headquarters with a drone. So not only does he have some xenophobia in there, but he might have some legitimate national security concerns, and so therefore the solution would be martial law, right? This seems like just natural things that you go and try to prosecute. But he does give the rub and the conflict. He says, under the current law, however, there is no way to punish foreign nationals for espionage. Isn't that a big problem? Isn't it usually people from other countries that spy on you? So what, you only have like espionage laws for Korean people, but not for foreign nationals? So he said, to prevent this kind of situation, I tried to amend the spy-related article of the Criminal Act, but the huge main opposition party has adamantly blocked it. So yes, this is great. It shows that you tried. You tried to propose legislation to strengthen the laws so that you can go after foreigners who come in and do espionage, and you have the receipts of examples that happened recently that were serious. So why didn't you just talk about this and then turn it into a situation where you can attack the Democratic Party and also strengthen your allies in the Conservative Party? It is just too easy of a layup for you to utilize in this game of politics. Remember, you are in governance and politics. That party stripped the National Intelligence Service of its anti-espionage investigative power during the previous administration and is now going so far as to try to repeal the National Security Act. So yes, he is talking to his base. His base thinks that the Democratic Party is literally handing over Korea to China, North Korea, communists, and leaving the security of South Korea in a very vulnerable state. He should double down on that with evidence and create a national dialogue if it's really true. Because people do want to know, there's a lot of talk, here and there, are the communists going to take over or not? Is it a lot of hot air? Bring the receipts. You're the president. You can do this. Doesn't this imply that we shouldn't catch spies who threaten our national security? You know what? You're not a man at the neighborhood barbecue pouring his life sob story into a soju bottle, or are you? But you're talking like one. You're the president. You don't have to deal with implications. If you think it's a problem, then you have the full arsenal of the government of South Korea to be able to at least state your case, which you're doing now. You're stating your case now, but you're stating your case after you have declared martial law, made yourself the biggest enemy in South Korea, and you might be on your way to impeachment land on Saturday. Despite North Korea's illegal provocations, threats of nuclear weapons and missiles, GPS jamming, floating trash balloons, and spy cases involving Korean Confederation of Trade Unions, the main opposition party sympathizes with the North. Okay, you already have decades of political capital, of people in the conservative voting bloc that agrees with you on what you have just said. You can continue the dialogue and then bring more evidence, because as the president, I'm sure you have a lot more access to evidence. Making matters worse, the opposition party is siding with North Korea while also tarnishing the government, which is struggling alone to respond to the North's provocations. They demand that the United Nations must first lift the sanctions that are imposed against North Korea for its illegal nuclear programs. So yes, this has been an ongoing debate that way precedes you, President Yoon, that in Korea there debate. Sometimes, most of the times, I would say, a healthy debate of whether you're hardline against North Korea or you're going to seek rapprochement, and then to what extent. And yes, as a conservative on that side, if you are, President Yoon, you can see the extremes of rapprochement with the North being way too conciliatory and almost like, are you a communist yourself? You could see it that way, but that is a debate that has been going on, and approaches vary by the president according to their agenda. So you're talking like you're a bystander in all of this. Every presidential administration sets their policy on North Korea, and then that leads the country to either be extremely hardline during that time or very loosey-goosey during another time. But if it's anybody, it's you, President Yoon, who gets to choose which way it goes. It is impossible to know which nation this political party truly serves and which nation the National Assembly actually represents. Stop crying about the National Assembly. You are the president. You are going to face opposition from the Democratic Party. It is just a fact of life. Next year's budget, covering the special expenses and special activity expenses for the prosecution service and police, have been reduced to zero. This budget is essential for supporting investigations into cases where people's livelihoods are encroached upon, such as incidents of financial fraud, crimes against the socially vulnerable, and probes into illegal narcotics. It is also needed to fund anti-espionage investigation activities. The budget for responding to narcotics and deepfake crimes has also been slashed. This is a point that will get you points on both sides of the political aisle if really you had not declared martial law to get attention for these and just done your job as president to try. I think he doesn't understand what the job of president is. He kind of thinks that's supposed to be a king. Like, I have an idea to fix all the problems that I just listed, and it's not working because the National Assembly is blocking me in every way. No, you have an idea. You have an outsized voice in pushing that idea to try to make it happen. But because it's a democracy with different branches of government, you're gonna face resistance with the National Assembly. And are the National Assembly full of bunny uncles? And yes. Is the Democratic Party part of the problem? Yes, but all of the politicians from both sides, no matter who you talk to, somebody's going to have a problem with somebody else. And is it just a fact of life that a lot of these politicians are actually horrible? Yes, some of them are great. A lot of them, no. You should already have known this. Especially after 2 years, and especially going through with this. You don't declare martial law because you're in a way like frustrated with how hard it is. You're supposed to get better at your job. These budget cuts, more than just block investigations that target those party members, they go so far as to block investigations into illegal activities that interfere with everyday people's lives, including narcotics violations and organized crime. Doesn't this amount to turning the Republic of Korea into a haven for spies, a den for drugs, and a nation of gang violence? Absolutely. Absolutely. Which is why you're supposed to work on solving it through the mechanisms of democracy. Of course, he's attacking those things because it does seem as if that is the power base for Lee Jae-myung. But martial law is not the solution to that. And also, he's making it a hypothetical. It hasn't happened in a way to the extreme yet. It hasn't, it's almost as if he says as if I need martial law because it's about to turn into a crisis, which would need martial law, but it could. So out of all the people, his background as a prosecutor, he is not some novelist or philosopher, kind of like trying to warn the public saying like, look, if you keep letting these dominoes fall, it is going to turn into a den of drugs and a nation of gang violence and a haven for spies. But you can't declare martial law on something that could happen. Aren't these kinds of people an anti-state force that is bent upon destroying the country? Some of them, yeah, probably. Yeah, I've met some of them. They're horrible. And dude, would it fulfill a fantasy for me to put them in a martial law situation? Yeah. But would I do it? No. Even with this being the case, the budget for maintaining their own privileges has been increased. Yes, dispatch will help you expose their hypocrisy. You have a lot of options. The economy, too, is in a state of emergency. The main opposition party is going so far as to shut off the Republic of Korea's economic growth engines. This becomes evident when you look at the Democratic Party's cutbacks in next year's budget. The financing for supporting the nuclear power ecosystem has been reduced. The funds allocated for the export of nuclear power plants to the Czech Republic have been slashed by 90%. The budget for developing next-generation nuclear plants has been virtually eliminated. So he's pissed. A lot of these nuclear deals, they seem to be some sweetheart double contract deals. I'm looking at you, Mr. Lee Myung-bak, that allow a president to secure a power base with the chaebols and political figures by kind of kickbacking here and there. And so he's kind of pissed off about that. But if it really was legitimate and also important to the economy, he should bring this up. The problem with a lot of his economic arguments is that each one of these things that he's talking about is not going to destroy the entire Korean economy where it's about to collapse, and then therefore he has to install martial law to prevent that from happening. A lot of these are projects that are in the billions of dollars, and Korea's economy, I believe, is like well over $1 trillion, maybe on its way to $2 trillion, depending on the exchange rate. So it's not enough to declare martial law over one nuclear power plant project. But of course, he's saying that's not just that. Funds for supporting basic scientific research, quantum computing, semiconductors, biotechnology, and other drivers of growth have been greatly reduced. Yeah, he could have interviewed all the job holders who are going to be affected. The budget for drilling in the East Sea gas fields, the so-called Blue Whale project, has practically been slashed completely. Another one of those deals that I think affect his power base more than the actual opportunity. But it could be an opportunity for energy independence. But of course, then energy is something like electricity bills, gas bills, something everybody relates to. They're not going to listen to you about lowering the electricity bill during martial law. Programs supporting jobs for youth, support for building up the assets of children in socially vulnerable families, and even child assistance allowances have been tinkered with. Yes, the children, the youth, the children. But to declare martial law. Also on the chopping block are the Innovative Growth Fund used to build the industrial ecosystem and budget for nurturing small enterprises with powerful technology. So yes, the young startups, you need them. They're important. But not having them during a presidential cycle is not going to collapse Korea's economy where you need martial law. About 1 trillion won has been taken away from the disaster response reserve. So that's not even $1 billion. While the research and development budget has also been reduced for vaccines to protect against pandemics. In this way, the Republic of Korea now finds itself in a state of governmental paralysis as a result of the main opposition party's autocratic and violent control of legislation. Social order is in chaos, and the government is unable to perform its administrative and jurisdictional tasks. Yes, so the budget didn't pass and it's not good. Ever heard of a revision or a different or another spending bill? Like, why is it all just one and done? Isn't that the nature of the legislature, that you can continuously pass legislation or revise and do amendments? And if it's not structurally sound, where it does have to be like a one and done deal, then maybe you should revise that as well. And on your way to try to revise, you're the one with the biggest megaphone that can set the national debate and agenda, Mr. President. Fellow Koreans, you may already know much about what I've mentioned so far. Yeah, because it's an old story. However, many other serious matters that have not been revealed directly to the public have also occurred. Yes, that's what we want to hear. Leading me to make the grave decision to impose martial law. Okay, what is the secret stuff? Maybe it was a big deal, because, I'm hoping he's not talking about the UFOs. Because if the aliens in the UFOs made a deal with Lee Jae-myung to do some sort of shenanigans on Korea, then martial law me up, lock me down, because I don't want a UFO, I don't want a Martian or an alien, and I do not want an Lee Jae-myung all working together. But what was it then? In the second half of last year, North Korea hacked into constitutional institutions such as the National Election Commission and other government organizations. As soon as this was detected, the National Intelligence Service checked for possible information leaks and sought to verify computer system safety. Okay, so it was a hacker. That should be just on your laundry list of things that can happen, because this is a country. Everybody is hacking into everybody else. This is like nobody's safe. But you don't declare martial law to fix a computer problem. All government organizations agreed to allow the National Intelligence Service to inspect their systems under their own observation. However, the National Election Commission stubbornly refused, arguing that it was a constitutional organization. So he wanted martial law to force his way into the National Election Commission to get the data to do an audit, because martial law is how you do audits. When the National Election Commission was subject to an audit and investigation due to its large-scale recruitment scandal, it stepped back and agreed to the National Intelligence Service's inspection. Okay, they went in. However, only a small part of their entire operating system was inspected, and inspections were not allowed in other remaining areas. Even though only a small part was inspected, the situation was serious. So again, if you want to do an audit, there are ways that you try to do legally and democratically and constitutionally. And if it's not in the Constitution, then that's when the Constitution itself might need an upgrade. He's basically saying that he wasn't able to do a full audit and look like it was shady. It does look shady. It looks shady. Your job is to shine some light on it. When National Intelligence Service employees tested the system through a mock hacking, they found that it was possible to manipulate the data there at will. There were virtually no firewalls. So who knows if it was North Korea or if it was the kid, in Taechidong, like on his break during Hagwon time. Because he said the password was very simple, like 12345. Look, y'all, he just spilled the password to the National Election Commission's internal databases. It's 12345. Oh my God. So couldn't he have told us while this was going on and gathered support for a special investigation team or a probe or a prosecutor? Like, he's the expert in all of that kind of stuff. Instead, after declaring martial law, and on his way to getting impeached, not only is he spilling us the story late, he told us the password, y'all, 12345. I don't know what he's gonna do. He's gonna declare martial law again and then tell us his Facebook password is like 6789110. The system security management company was very small and lacked expertise. As president, I was shocked by the National Intelligence Service's report. Shocked. How can our people trust election results when the computer system that manages the election, the very foundation of democracy, is in such array? True. But you don't solve a defect in democracy by taking democracy away through martial law. The National Election Commission was present during the National Intelligence Service's security inspections, and all they did was to repeat again and again the excuse that they had not manipulated the data themselves. Excuses, Mr. Excuses. Don't like excuses himself. The National Election Commission is a constitutional body, and some of its commissioners are from the judiciary. Therefore, it is virtually impossible to initiate a warrant-based search and seizure and conduct compulsory investigations. So this is cool. He's telling us how the sausage is made. This is like some structural legalese type of limitation. The people should know about this so that they can probably demand that the laws get changed or some negotiations. You start that off as a point of democracy with the public instead of just doing martial law. Without the National Election Commission's cooperation, it's impossible to ascertain the truth. So yes, does it look like the National Election Commission needs an audit? But martial law to do it? Even before the last general elections on April 24th, 2024, I demanded improvements to the areas of concern. However, it is still impossible to verify whether relevant improvements were made. He demanded, and he expected compliance. You can't demand anything in Korea like that. Even as the president, he should know that. For this reason, I directed the Minister of National Defense to inspect the National Election Commission's computer system. So that was kind of part of the whole martial law thing. When the main opposition Democratic Party of Korea recently vowed to impeach the chief prosecutor and Seoul Central District Prosecutor's Office, the prosecutors who investigate and audit their corruption, as well as the chair of the Board of Audit and Inspection, a constitutional body, I decided I could no longer sit idly by. He could no longer sit idly by. That was his first problem. Sitting idle. Should have been active from the jump. And then he said, I thought I had to do something. You think? You think? A little late and then a little drastic. You should have done something right away. If anything, you have the pulpit of the presidency. you can start the national dialogue and have a big hand in directing how that dialogue goes. And there are a lot of people I know in Korea that already would serve as the base of agreeing with you on this. It became clear they would soon point the impeachment knife to the judiciary as well. This is why I consider the option of declaring martial law. Although the huge group of opposition parties kept taking unconstitutional measures that overstepped its constitutional authority, I decided to exercise my authority within the framework of the Constitution. I decided to declare martial law based on my judgment that the current devastating paralysis of state affairs was the result of the executive and judicial branches' state functions collapsing as the result of social disruption. That was the basis of his decision, that the state affairs had become paralyzed because of social disruption. That doesn't make sense. And shouldn't the prosecutors prosecute if the opposition parties kept taking these unconstitutional measures? Shouldn't that be what the prosecutors would do? Although it does make sense how he's saying like they were attacking the prosecutors so that they wouldn't be checked on their unconstitutional moves. But again, he has the power of the media and he has the power of the government to find a different solution. Unless really, I mean, that Lee Jae-myung, I wouldn't put him past it, that he blocked all access points and then trapped the president in, but still, he's the president. My purpose was to inform the public about the colossal group of opposition parties' heinous anti-state behavior and to warn them to cease such behaviors. So again, this was a warning. This was a message to the public. And now he is trying to justify his martial law as the biggest warning sign that he was trying to hold ever. In doing so, I sought to halt the collapse of our free and democratic constitutional order and to normalize state functions. And in fact, the Democratic Party of Korea said it would defer bills of impeachment against the chair of the Board of Audit and Inspection and the chief prosecutor of the Seoul Central District Prosecutor's Office after martial law was lifted on December 4th. That led me to think my brief declaration of martial law had some effect. Okay, so his tantrum got what he wanted. But then he said, but 2 days later, they passed those deferred bills of impeachment anyway. They were determined to eliminate my rationale for declaring martial law. So he's saying like, oh my gosh, the legislature, it seemed like they had given in to my tantrum, but then they took it back. How unfair. Oh my gosh. This is when I think a few more PPP lawmakers publicly stated that they are going to vote for his impeachment. I had initially told the defense minister that unlike previous martial law decrees, I would make an emergency appeal to the public and inform Koreans about the current crisis in the form of martial law. That is why I deployed a small number of troops, only enough to maintain order, and did not equip them with lethal weapons. I said I would withdraw the troops as soon as the National Assembly passed a resolution to lift martial law. Now he is going into bunny logic. It looks like he has consulted Minijin Shaman. He basically said that like, oh, I didn't really mean to do a real martial law because you can look at the evidence. There's only a few number of troops, a small number of troops, and I was going to I had plans to take them out anyway after I knew the National Assembly would vote to cancel my martial law. So again, he's really trying to make this about like, oh, this was just like my panic cry for help on behalf of the nation. So once the National Assembly passed that resolution, I called the defense minister, who was then at the ministry building, over to my office and ordered him to immediately withdraw the troops. This is huge gaslighting. Of course he did that, of course, because he was forced to do that, because the National Assembly passed the resolution to say no to martial law. The emergency measures I took as president were designed not to destroy the constitutional order and the Constitution, but to protect and to restore them and to inform the public of this disastrous crisis for our country. The reason I sent a small contingent of troops, so now he's justifying, oh, it's only a small amount, so therefore it wasn't a real martial law. The reason I sent a small contingent of troops to the National Assembly was to symbolically reveal the destructive behavior of that huge group of opposition parties. Those troops were intended to maintain order since large numbers of citizens and people from the National Assembly were likely to gather after seeing the broadcast about the martial law declaration. Oh, so he said that he actually sent those troops out to protect the public because they're going to be looky-loos and be like, oh gosh, there's a martial law now, and most likely things are going to be going down at the National Assembly. So they were there for safety. Obviously, the troops were not intended to disperse the National Assembly or paralyze its functions. I don't know. He's not good at lying. You shouldn't start now. That's not why he was elected. We saw the video. There were people from there was troopation going on, breaking into the National Assembly, blocking the National Assembly, trying to paralyze the National Assembly. A contingent of fewer than 300 soldiers without lethal weapons could not have held the spacious grounds of the National Assembly for any significant amount of time. Well, who knows if only 300 people showed up? I mean, maybe you called out 3,000, but only 300 people want to go along with this whole martial law thing. The sort of martial law decrees issued in the past required tens of thousands of troops and a great deal of prior discussions and preparations. However, I did not order the defense minister to dispatch the troops until after I had informed the public about martial law in my televised statement. So essentially saying he pranked the country with martial law so that he could make a statement against the National Assembly's corruption. He's like, it's a prank. Therefore, I gave my televised address to the nation at 10:30 p.m. The troop deployment started at 11:30 p.m. or a little after midnight. When the National Assembly voted to lift martial law a little later at 1 a.m., the troops were ordered to withdraw immediately. In the end, the troops were only there for an hour or two. Only an hour or two. This is total Eugene's mama logic. If the objective was to paralyze the functions of the National Assembly, martial law should have been imposed on the weekend, not on a weekday. Oh my gosh, who's going to buy that? The measure to cut power and water to the National Assembly building would have been taken, and broadcasting would have also been restricted. Oh, because he let them flush the toilets. It wasn't martial law. However, none of these measures had been taken. The National Assembly conducted deliberations normally, well, if you count like scaling a fence when you're like 60 years old, and the proceedings were broadcast live to the entire nation. Well, you know, it has become normal to carry sledgehammers and axes and then try to break down walls to try to go vote in Korea's National Assembly. So maybe he does have a point there, but nobody got punched in the face. So that part of the normal didn't really work out. Even though we took indispensable emergency measures to appeal to the public as part of the efforts to restore and defend the free and democratic constitutional order, we ensured that everything possible has been done as safety precautions to prevent casualties. This is why only elite troops above the level of non-commissioned officers, not regular conscripts, were deployed. Oh, so he's basically saying like assassin level, kidnapping skills required, otherwise sorry. That justifies why he just, had a small group and it wasn't meant to hurt the public. In preparing this martial law, I discussed it only with the Minister of National Defense. I informed some of my staff and cabinet members at the cabinet meeting right before its declaration. Many of those present opposed its declaration, expressing concerns relevant to their areas of responsibility. So I guess he's trying to cover the butts of some of his staff. From the perspective of the president, who oversees the entire state affairs, I explained that this measure was inevitable in the current situation. Military officers have done nothing wrong. They were simply following my orders to move troops after the declaration. Let me be clear, I did not block National Assembly members and staff from entering the assembly. The video evidence looks different. That is why lawmakers and a huge crowd were able to enter the National Assembly grounds. Did he not see the video? The main building and the plenary chamber, and why the deliberation about lifting martial law was able to be conducted. So see, it was just a big joke. Where have we heard that language before? And yet, somehow, there are those who have managed to greatly incite others erroneously by fabricating charges of insurrection designed to bring me down. You said your main enemy was the National Assembly. You said that you sent soldiers there, 300 of them, elite soldiers there, after you declared martial law. And now you're saying it was just a big prank, just to get attention, to tell your side of the story, which you could have done anyway, any day of the week. about how bad the National Assembly has been for Korea. Can there be a 2-hour-long insurrection? Well, yeah, if you got stopped. Your 2-hour insurrection was probably going to be about 2 years. Is it a revolt if you deploy a small number of troops briefly to maintain order? Why is the colossal group of opposition parties rushing to impeach me under false pretenses? There is only one reason, he says. Since a guilty verdict in a case against the leader of the main opposition party is imminent, they are trying to get around it by impeaching the president and holding an early presidential election. So yes, he understands the game. Yes, this is he's basically saying all of this is to get Lee Jae-myung elected as president. However, you're the one that declared martial law that prompted this whole process for impeachment. It doesn't make sense. They are trying to cover up their crimes and seize control of state affairs, even by destroying the national system. Do I think that Lee Jae-myung is not above destroying the national system to cover up his own crimes? Oh, yes. Yeah, for sure. But martial law is not the solution to try to get your point across and get people to help you block Lee Jae-myung. Whether they impeach me or investigate me, I will stand firm. I have already said that I will not evade legal or political responsibility for the declaration of martial law. Since taking office, I have never been concerned about my approval rating, my term as president, or maintaining my position. I totally believe that. I don't think he really cares about having too much power, but in a way, I think that worked against him because he didn't really pay attention to. He essentially, if you're the president of South Korea, you have to pay attention to those types of political games and learn to master them. Otherwise, you end up crying like this about people who play the game better than you. If I had only thought about keeping my position, I would not have fought against forces disrupting the Constitution, and I would not have declared martial law as I did. But what about your wife? How come there's absolutely no mention of her yet? I could not allow myself to obsess over protecting my 5-year term and turn my back on the country and the people. Country and the people. His wife and his wife. I could not betray the intention of the people who elected me. It was an attempt to protect the Republic of Korea's freedom, democracy, and constitutional order against a huge group of opposition parties, parliamentary dictatorship, as it continued to abuse its majority power to pass a series of unreasonable acts. It is entirely obsessed with defending its leader. I do not doubt that for a second. Again, but martial law is not the answer to that. How can a decision based on the Constitution and the authority of a president who believed that there was no alternative to be considered insurrection? Okay, because you couldn't think of a different answer to the problem, you want to not face any consequences in terms of insurrection? You literally were insurrecting. The president exercising the right to declare martial laws within the realm of executive authority, which is not subject to judicial review, as when exercising the right to pardon or to conduct foreign affairs. Yes, you can declare martial law, but for emergencies and wars and like extreme events, or maybe even UFOs now. Fellow Koreans, there he goes again with the fellow Koreans. The opposition parties are trying to drag me out of the presidency by accusing me of a serious crime. What will happen if the country is governed by a destructive force that abuses the Constitution? Yes, but that is up to the voters to decide. And if the voters want to get hoodwinked into voting for Lee Jae-myung, like, you have to accept that. You have to accept that. Unconstitutional laws, self-exonerating laws, and economy-destroying legislation will be rammed through the National Assembly and completely destroy this country. It could definitely happen. I agree that it probably would happen if there was like a crazy person like that Mr. Lee Jae-myung as the president. But that's still a hypothetical. And if you were like a philosopher, professor, or some other like thought leader in civil society, yes, you should like say that very adamantly. But you're the president, and you can't say it. You can't use that as justification of a hypothetical thing that could happen to declare martial law. Nuclear power and semiconductor industries and other future growth engines will wither, and China-made solar power facilities will destroy forests across the country. The ROK-US alliance and ROK-US-Japan cooperation, the foundations of our security and economy, will be undermined once again. North Korea will further advance its nuclear weapons and missiles, posing greater threats to our lives. Then what will become of the future of this country, the Republic of Korea? Our country will become a place where spies run rampant, drugs ruin future generations, and organized crime takes over. Those are all very valid concerns, but your martial law is not going to fix it. Especially when you said, like, oh, I expected the martial law to be canceled right away anyway. That makes no sense. So then how are you going to fix all of these problems with martial law and just be like, oh, well, it was just a PR stunt? Like I said, you have the biggest platform to do any PR that you want, Mr. President. We must prevent the forces and criminal groups that have paralyzed state affairs and breached the Constitution to date from taking control of state affairs and threatening the future of the Republic of Korea at all costs. I will fight to the end. My fellow Koreans, I declared emergency martial law under the president's legal authority to protect the country and normalize state affairs in a catastrophic emergency that paralyzed state affairs. So he was saying this is catastrophic, but then everyone's looking around like, where's the catastrophe? The declaration of martial law is a highly political decision by the president and can only be overturned by a request to do so from the National Assembly. Many are aware that this is the judicial precedent and the majority opinion of constitutional scholars. I immediately accepted the National Assembly's request to lift martial law. Some of you have different ideas about the requirements for declaring martial law. Really? Really? There are a lot of people who debate on what the problem is, but usually people come to a consensus, and then where the debate is more of like the solutions proposed. But never have I ever seen so much consensus that this is the wrong solution, that martial law was the wrong solution. However, as many constitutional scholars and legal professionals point out, viewing emergency measures aiming to save the country as an act of insurrection, an attempt to destroy the country, puts our constitution and legal system at serious risk. There's something I'd like to ask. Where and what on earth did those who are now performing a frenzied sword dance here, that's basically saying like you're making moves to threaten, and there do to bring the country to the state? Do they mean that they never thought Korea is under crisis? Korea is always under crisis. Everybody's under crisis. Yeah. Everyone bringing the crisis, trying to solve the crisis. I call on public officials. In the face of this grave security situations and global economic crisis, I urge you to continue working tirelessly to protect the safety and livelihood of the people. My fellow Koreans, for the past 2.5 years of my presidency, I've fought against wrongs, injustice, and tyranny committed under the guise of democracy to protect and rebuild freedom and democracy, focusing only on the people. And your wife. I earnestly appeal to you, all the people, to unite as one in protecting the Republic of Korea and our freedom and democracy, which we have upheld with blood and sweat. I will fight with you, the people, until the last moment. I apologize again to the people for causing surprise and anxiety by the imposition of martial law, regardless of brief duration. Please believe in my heartfelt loyalty to you, the people. Thank you. Not one word of his wife. Where did she play as a role in your decision-making tree for martial law? I think it was at the top, because it's really at the top of the decision-making tree for the National Assembly. So the National Assembly on Thursday, on the same day that when he made this 28-minute explanation speech, passed 2 bills calling for a special counsel investigations into him for insurrection and against his wife over ongoing corruption scandals. So apparently Yoon can veto this one that they passed on Thursday against his wife, but he still cannot veto what was passed on Tuesday that would go against his wife. So remember I said last week that he, through his martial law, wanted to stop that vote on December 10th that did pass the National Assembly, that he cannot veto and stop. Yeah. And on Thursday, local time in Korea, December 12th, there's supposed to be another new documentary about his wife being released to the public. But had his martial law succeeded, he would have been able to block that documentary as well. So December 10th, December 12th, key dates against his wife. He could have blocked it if he had been able to be successful with his martial law. So the National Assembly says that every Saturday they're going to hold an impeachment vote until they can get the 200 votes necessary. And do we have more people? Yes, we have more people peeling away from the ruling party, especially after that show that President Yoon gave. So 7 ruling party lawmakers, most of them are of the pro-Han Dong-hoon faction within the party. So Han Dong-hoon, remember, like, he had gotten power as the interim president along with the prime minister, but then now the president is just saying, like, no, sorry, I changed my mind, I'm still the president. I think what President Yoon realized, or he's probably coached by his wife, saying, like, look, you haven't been impeached and you haven't resigned, you're still the president. So you go off and you do your presidential things until they can drag you down, and let it cost the people of your own party something to vote against you. And so they don't have all 200 votes right now. It looks like they're 1 vote shy of the 200. And they also today knocked out Cho-guk, who is part of the opposition camp, but in his own special party. And he has a huge revenge story, but essentially he was polling third in a presidential poll. So Lee Jae-myung is at the top with a wide lead. I think it's like 37%. And then it's Han Dong-hoon, and then it's Cho-guk. So they are sending him to jail. They're sending Cho-guk to jail. The Supreme Court finalized a 2-year prison term on charges of academic fraud involving his children and illegal interference with a government inspection. So Cho-guk is mad. So he loses his seat in the National Assembly. He loses his vote for impeachment, but his seat is going to go to a replacement, and they're going to fast track so that she can still vote for the impeachment by this Saturday. But if they can do some funny business there, they can knock down 1 more vote and make it a real struggle to try to get to 200, if that is part of the game. Cho-guk, I think, like, he was sent there in the Moon administration to go fix the Constitution and do some major upgrades, like some good things. And then the conservatives really attacked him and stymied him and got him removed. Like, he lost a lot, and his wife lost her career. The daughter lost the career, even though the daughter seemed like she kind of nepo babied her way too much into her profession as a doctor, and that's can't be a doctor. So he is mad. Usually going to jail before you become president in Korea, like, helps you become president. So maybe this is a good thing for him. He's going to, do some pre-reflections of past, just kind of reflect the way that some presidents made their way into the presidential office. So I would keep my eye on Cho-guk. I think he may be another presidential contender. But if President Yoon gets impeached and then there's the next election, it really does look at this point, unless they can finalize those pending rulings against Lee Jae-myung to knock him out of the race, it looks like Lee Jae-myung is going to be the next president. I don't think Han Dong-hoon can be the next president. I don't think he has that national kind of gravitas or profile. So then it would be very, very unclear who would be a strong contender for the next president of South Korea. So this is kind of very uncertain times there. All right, guys, what do you think? Were you convinced by President Yoon's further clarification of the reason why he declared martial law and how it was just a cry for help and his just way of getting the public's attention about all of the nefarious things that the Democratic Party is doing in the National Assembly, even though he could have just sent it out in an email, done his own press conference. Like, he could have done all of it without martial law, in my opinion. All right, guys, I want to hear your opinion. Put your comments below. Remember to like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.